Te taua mai e raro, te taua mai e roto, te taua mai i waho, kia tau mai i maunatu, te maunatu ora ki te katoa, haumie, hui e, taiki e. Thank you. Welcome to our submitters today. Just to let you know, you have 5 minutes to give your presentation, and then there's 5 minutes, a bell will ring at the end of that 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes for questions. But if you do run a little over the initial 5 minutes, that's no problem. We're being pretty relaxed about it all. So I would like to welcome Debbie, who is our first submitter today. So welcome, Debbie.
Thank you very much. Mayor-wise, elected members, Dr. Rotarangi, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Debbie Monaghan and I'm the General Manager for Biodiversity Hawke's Bay. I have the privilege today of also presenting on behalf of Professor Bruce Clarkson and Dr. Kerry Joy Wallace from the People, Cities and Nature Research Program funded by the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment and based at the University of Waikato in Hamilton. It is not the intention of Biodiversity Hawke's Bay or the University of Waikato to comment on the broader rating questions that Napier City are considering, but both of our submissions are focused on the negative impact that the proposed changes could have on private landowners who have undertaken protection and enhancement of the natural environment on their land. Specifically, our comments refer to Friends Bush, located in Jervois Road in Jervois Town. This native forest stand has been completely recreated from farmland over the last 40 years by Mr. Colin James, who owns it and lives adjacent to it. Friends Bush is listed as Site 28 in the Napier Significant Natural Areas report produced in 2019. It meets the significance criteria: 1, representativeness, 2, diversity and pattern, and 3, rarity and distinctiveness at the city scale. In an ecological sense, it is a remarkable piece of bush. Friends Bush has been an important research site for the People, Cities and Nature Research Program. They have established a permanent plot there which allows them to study its ecosystem dynamics with a special focus on native seedling regeneration. Friends Bush hosts some of the largest trees in the nationwide study of restored urban forests, taonga species like kahikatea, puriri and kauri, and offspring of tane mahuta. It also demonstrates remarkable seedling regeneration and is clearly a valuable habitat for native fauna which spills over into the surrounding community. This private landholding is contributing to the environment, biodiversity enhancement, the success of native corridors in the city and public wellbeing. Most importantly, Friends Bush is a model for what can be achieved in terms of the reconstruction of Indigenous forest habitat. In order to reach the minimum 10% Indigenous vegetation cover in urban environments, foreshadowed in the draft National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity, which is due to be ratified in April this year, the restoration seen at Friends Bush shows the way forward. Further, urban restoration planting of this style will be needed to increase the area of urban forest dominated by Indigenous species, and what is already present should be protected, not penalised. While the rates for remission guidelines do provide remission on a case-by-case basis, they do not appear to provide guidance on the type of situation we have outlined here. We respectfully request that the Napier City Council seeks ways of encouraging landowners to undertake environmental protection and enhancement, for example, by way of rate relief, as occurs in other councils around New Zealand. It would be a perverse result if Friends Bush or similar initiatives were curtailed or potentially lost due to changes in the rating system, which lead to owners who have voluntarily made environmental improvements for the public good becoming discouraged. By recognising their efforts and providing some form of rate relief, Napier City Council would be seen to be supporting the efforts of those who have volunteered a lot and demonstrate the Council's commitment to an enhanced Indigenous biodiversity in the city. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Debbie. And I'll just open up now to councillors for any questions that they may have. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Debbie. Like you said, it may not be specific to the questions we've asked in our general rating survey, but I did just want to reassure you that Council is proposing to continue the rate exemption for SNAs as we map those through the district planning process, and that I hope your involvement in that process will see that continue as a recommendation for us. So it's certainly on the cards through our district planning process.
Thank you. I mean, we would welcome the opportunity to continue to engage with you on that. Thank you.
Councillor Bogue.
I just wondered, hi Debbie, are there any other stands of bush like this within our area or within Hawke's Bay?
I'm not sure about the size of private land holdings. I'm aware that there are definitely kind of pockets of native bush around the region, and one of the things we're keen to do is actually work with the community groups in the cities, the TAs and the regional council to support community efforts. So one of the things Hawke's Bay wants to do is actually help community groups get through the red tape with the bureaucracy, basically remove barriers so they can get on and do the doing, and we're the ones who work with councils and others to try and get them funding, manage the funds they receive. So our hope is to continue to enhance sites like Friends Bush.
Just a question from me, Debbie. You mentioned that you're aware there is a remission option for properties such as this, but you felt that it was unclear in the policy how that could be essentially accessed. Is that correct?
Yes, I suppose one of the things we're looking at is, does it actually explicitly say that if you're meeting particular environment standards or criteria, that it's explicitly stated?
Okay.
And because there's other things that are explicit as when you do get remission, and we'd just be very keen to see that, if you like, clarified, that if you have a site like this, and as long as you maintain it in that enhanced state and the environment's benefiting, that it's specifically in there as a remission.
Thank you very much.
Could I just respond to that, because I've done a bit of research into this particular circumstance. There is in our rating portfolio, we have remission for special circumstances, which is where this would possibly fall. It would be a decision that would need to be made by council, considering the particular special circumstances of this Friends Bush. But there is definitely a place in our rates policies where we could look very seriously in considering full remission for this particular stand of bush.
Excellent.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, what's the current remission that you're getting on the land? Is it full or partial?
I think that would be the question for the next presenter.
Okay.
The landowner.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And so I would invite Colin Jones to come up for the next submission. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. For every action, there is a reaction. That is always the way it has been and the way it always will be. I didn't bring my submission with me because I thought I'd sooner just speak from the heart. If this council decides to go forward and increase the rates on my property, it will have to be felled. Fortunately for me, it is already zoned as building sites, so I will at least get some return on my effort, but I have no intentions of paying a huge rate increase. Already, I believe I pay high enough rates on what is virtually a stand of native bush, and I think it would be just beyond my ability. And also, at 80 years of age, I don't need the stress of having to find money for the council every 4 months. It's just too hard. It has been a wonderful experience to create this place. It has been used by a lot of people for a lot of different events, and it has been an absolute honour to have people visit it and enjoy it as much as I have. It is the work of just me, my wheelbarrow and a spade. and I will hate to see it go, but if it has to go, it will. I've already made arrangements with people who will fell it, and I am prepared to do that if I have to. There are some plants that I will be able to save, plants like Nighhouse, not queen palms, silver ferns, and the very rare king fern which are in there. They will go to conservation groups to plant elsewhere, but as for the rest of them, they wouldn't be able to be transplanted at all. So that's the situation I'm in, and I'm sort of more or less at your mercy as to whether it survives or falls. Thanks for your time. I would like to ask a question of you, if I could, please. Is there a criteria you have to abide by when you are declaring an area city residential? Is there a government audit that says you have to provide a certain amount of amenities?
No,
So you can, as a council, make your own mind up?
That's correct.
That seems very wrong to me. I would not agree with that at all. I think there should be a standard format that all councils have to follow. You must provide this infrastructure, you must provide whatever before you're allowed to do that. I think this is very wrong.
Thank you, Colin, for coming today. And I did just want to take the opportunity, having admired your garden for many, many years, to say I do understand, you know, the significance of this view. It is a beautiful garden. It is a community asset. So I wanted to take the time to acknowledge that and say thank you for what you've done on behalf of not just the Jervoistown community, but the whole of the Napier community with providing such a beautiful natural space. So in saying that, I will open up for questions. Councillor Bogue, then Councillor Brown.
There you go. No, I just wanted to say, I understand, Colin, that you've had funerals, weddings, celebrations there. And do you charge for those?
No, we don't. We do fundraising. I've had the Napier City Band out there twice doing a concert, and the conductor told me that they raised more money there than they do by getting on the back of a truck driving around at Christmas time trying to raise funds. They were raising funds for some young guy's uniform, which was $1,200 or something, and so they've done that twice. And there's lots of community groups have used it. I have visits from schools. EIT bring their classes down there, so there's a great diversity of people take the opportunity to use it, and it's been very inspirational for a lot of people, I can assure you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Colin. I'm just wondering, are you currently getting a remission on your rates, or how's it? No, so you're paying full rates at the moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan?
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
no?
Thank you, Colin. I was just thinking, actually, but the Mayor's picked up on it. And I'd like to echo the congratulations. I've had many friends get married in your bush and the likes, and it's a wonderful space. It's certainly council's intention, like I'd mentioned to Debbie earlier, that areas of significant natural area like yours receive rates remissions for the like, and I was just trying to convey with staff where exactly that is held, and it may be in special circumstances or it may be in an incoming section to our rates remission policy off the back of our district plan exercise to identify those areas, which currently isn't happening. So I suppose would like to give you some reassurance it's not council's intention to raise rates. In fact, it may be the opposite if you're paying rates on Friends Bush at the moment anyway. So that's a good piece of news. And the other thought I had listening to your kōrero, thank you for that, was that we're not proposing to rezone your property as residential. The rating component we were talking about is the general rate, and that small component of your rate we were proposing to make the same as residential properties. So, just wanted to give you a little bit of peace of mind, I suppose, and perhaps we could follow up with you. I think Adele said she may have some correspondence to come out to you that we're not intending to raise the rates on Friends Bush, in fact, potentially the opposite.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. And next I'd like to invite Anna Sanders to present. Welcome, Anna.
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity, Mayor Wise and councillors, for the opportunity to present our submission on this revenue and policy hearing. This submission is presented on behalf of myself and Ben Sanders. I hold a bachelor's degree in resource and environmental planning with nearly 25 years experience in planning, project management and local government. Our submission, which I'm sure you've all read, mentioned the inequalities of the proposed system and sought that a number of the categories be increased to recognise the differences between Napier's residential areas. Significantly, that we pay for our own services and that the policy be fair and equitable and reflect the level of service and fair usage of fixed council services received. It was suggested that the UAGC should be increased from $375 to an accurately calculated rate based on all fixed services for all households. We certainly don't disagree with the notion that rates should support the city infrastructure and local services it provides. But in fairness, this should be towards services that we do not use, should not be towards services that we do not use or have access to use. Nor should we be subsidising other categories. It is recommended in the officer's report that a new semi-rural category be added, which is commended. However, what I can't locate is an explanation as to what current categories will be categorised as semi-rural, nor can I find a detailed assessment of how the 92.5% rating differential was arrived at. In the interests of fairness, this should have been included in the report to give submitters an appropriate time to consider the assessment and respond. It leaves the impression that the assessment is arbitrary. In the absence of this information, and considering whether the proposal, including the suggested differential of 92.5%, is fair and equitable, I make the following observations and comments. Is it truly an accurate reflection of the level of services or the fair usage of fixed council services received? Rural residential, semi-rural properties do not receive the same benefit or the same services in the area. Public transport does not service Jubilestown Miani. Rural standard roads, potholes frequently appear as the road hasn't been appropriately designed, and there seems limited maintenance provision. Street lighting is limited and are spread significantly further apart. Street trees are minimal, no curb and channelling or footpaths. We have instead open drains, wide berms and no provision of a community neighbourhood playground. Local authorities must review their revenue and finance policies every 3 years. This can either be a review to confirm the policy's relevance and appropriateness or first principles review. Either way, since 1989's amalgamation, thank you, every 3 years since then, a legislative review has been needed by different council memberships. Both options have provided the opportunity to implement change, but none have obviously taken this up. Why? Perhaps the legacy inherited by Napier City Council post-amalgamation continues to be an accurate reflection of the level of service, of the fair level of service of fixed council services or the levels of services received. Just because a review is needed doesn't mean that the current policy or aspects of it are no longer appropriate or don't reflect realities. A 25% plus increase in rates is not fair nor equitable, is well ahead of the rate of inflation, with no increase in council-provided services in the area affected to justify the increases in cost. With the suggested increase in rates, where is the improvement in infrastructure and services? At the community meetings, it was made clear by council that there was to be no increase in the level of service to Jervoistown residents. So what precisely are the increases for? With the limited services provided by council, as part of the maintenance program, we were advised in January that McCowie Street was to be resealed. The map included in the notice suggested that the works were to include the entire public portion and beyond. What was completed was a central portion only, which particularly, which wasn't the worst part affected, the cul-de-sac head where people turn around is. Particularly, damage around the manhole cover remains, and the job included sealing over the tidy concrete nib edge. What fewer benefits we do receive, residents are left with an impression of a job done poorly, or perhaps, hopefully, not yet finished. In the district plan, it is recognised that adequate disposal of stormwater is a concern in heavy and prolonged rain events, but with no increase in spending, what is being done to alleviate this? One of the responses provided at the community meeting was that often properties in the current general rate differential category 5 are valued less, so that the proposal will have less of an impact. This is not true. Market valuations up to the beginning of September this year, was used as the basis for the new valuations. It is well known that property values in Hawke's Bay have substantially increased, with the median value increasing substantially over the last 10 years. COVID has also resulted in an increase in interest around lifestyle properties, as more people want space and lifestyle options, with people spending more time at home. It also increased opportunities for people to work from home. The highest median increase for lifestyle properties since record began was in July 2020. This is reflected in the newly released capital value figures. The most expensive suburb in Hawke's Bay is Jervoistown, which has a median house price of $925,000, a median which is 1.4 times the Hawke's Bay's median. The capital value of our property at McCowie Street, which has a land area of 2,500 roughly, it was $850,000 in value and is now 1.210, an increase of 42%, compared to similar sized property in Taradale on Cambridge Terrace, which is zoned residential and therefore has subdivision benefits. Their value has increased from 2017 to 2020 of 21.9%. We submit that the once divide between residential and rural residential values no longer exists or is closing. In our submission, we make the point that the timing of the release of the proposal was unfortunate. The second letter was received on the proposal in early November and indicated that our rates would increase substantially, roughly by the amount it costs to provide and maintain our own water and wastewater. What isn't reflected in the letter is the new valuation information released by Quotable Value in December. While the new valuations were released in time for submissions closing, why couldn't council have waited so all Napier ratepayers received a more accurate outline based on the new quotable value figures, truly giving them an understanding of what the implications of the proposal are? In making decisions on recommendations, it is worth highlighting that the officer's report, including commentary and recommendations, are just one side of the evidence before you. Please make resolutions with detailed reasons which show the community that they are being listened to, rather than having ideas forced upon it and that it is not all a done deal. The council has recently gone out for feedback on the LTP, which determines the vision for Napier's future. A budget that sets out the projects and activities that council will focus on over the next 10 years. How can this occur ahead of decisions on what will partly fund it? The revenue and financing policy, which is what you are hearing on submissions on this week. And as we have been advised publicly, the council is yet to make decisions on. If the community wishes to seek alterations to the way funding activities are provided for, which a number of submissions do, then this should be decided first and then changes subsequently reflected in the LTP and only then consulted on. Putting the LTP out for feedback when you did gives the impression that the revenue decisions have already been made. Perceptions matter. Simply creating opportunities to have communities' voices listened to is not the same as being heard. Thank you for your time. Sorry, I know I've gone over.
No, that's fine, Anna. And just to provide a little bit of clarity around the long-term plan, we haven't actually gone out for formal consultation on that yet.
So we're still feedback.
It was a check-in before we moved forward to the next step. So
I understand that,
yeah.
but I still think it's about managing perceptions.
Yeah, and I guess just the comment that because the changes proposed under this policy review don't have any effect on the total amount of revenue collected from rates,
Yes,
so
that's
it's just
true.
the distribution amongst the
Yep.
various classifications. So it doesn't, I wouldn't say that it has a huge impact on the long-term plan from that perspective, because we're not getting additional money or less money. We've still got the same amount of money of which to spread across the...
I understand
Yeah,
the pool's the
yeah.
same,
Yeah.
but what I'm talking about is perceptions in terms of when you go out for the timing around it and how the material that is released is framed.
Take that on board. I will open up for questions. No questions, Anya. Thank you very much for taking the time to come in today. And our next submitter is Robert Bremner. Welcome, Robert. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert Bremner from Variety, affected by this proposal. Just read my submission. Based on the new QV ratings published in the Hawke's Bay today, on the 30th to the 11th, 2020, the average land value for residential land in Napier is now $304,000, whereas rural residential land, as I like to call it, or it could be described as other things, is now $563,000. So therefore, if we pay the same differential, the rural residential people average will be paying 85% more in rates than the same people in Napier. Less infrastructure, as you've obviously heard, for rural residential people, saying about road, street lights, footpaths, etc. We were told the proposal to change it was to make it fairer for everyone, so that we paid the same amount. But the existing differential at 63.4% would still have the rural residential people averaging 17% more than residential people, while rural residential property land value is going up 8% more, so it's sort of working out that way. We get less infrastructure, therefore our differential should be going down. It's not a fair proposal when 85% more tax, as I like to call it, is going to be paid by people rural rather than people in town. It's just based purely because our land values are quite high. Our land value is high because we have a paddock with 2 sheep or a horse or a donkey or something like that. It isn't costing the council any more for us to have that paddock. We're still paying our fair share for the library, for the public toilets, for the whatever else. We're paying more than the average person in town. So for the council to collect money for us to pay for those structures, we're not saying we're not paying for it. We're paying quite a lot more if it adds up to 85% more from the average rural residential property. There's not much point going on about lack of infrastructure or anything like that. It's all been said, I think, many times over by every person that's been in here. You should know that one by now. But to ask us to pay that much more is just not right. It's not fair. And that's all I've got to say, really.
Thank you very much, Robert. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Robert. Sorry, I couldn't quite follow your maths on the 17% more that the rural ratepayers pay than residential ratepayers.
Well, if you work out the rates on the average person in Napier paying on a property valued at $304,000, and the average rural residential property is valued at $563,000. So the average person has a value of 300 in Napier and 560 in the rural sector. So at 63% that what we were paying, you actually work out how much you pay, and you're actually paying more rates, purely because of the land values. But your cash in hand is actually more from rural residential people than it is from residential people now.
Okay, so can I just make sure I've got this right in my head? So are you saying the average land value in Napier
is
like
304,000 by QV, and the average rural land value is set at the moment is 563,000, published in Hawke's Bay today, and I checked it through QV. Those are the rates provided by QV. So every person that's come in here from rural area, the average price of their land is 563,000. So the amount of rates they pay you on that is higher than the average person in town. So at the moment, you're getting 17% more cash in hand from a rural person than a residential person. You want to increase that to 85% more cash in hand from rural people than residential people for less services.
Okay.
And call it fair. Let's make it fair. If we're getting less infrastructure, technically we should be paying less.
Just to follow up on the infrastructure thing, you realise that if you don't get water or sewage, then you don't pay for it?
Yeah, but everyone's obviously brought up footpaths, street lights,
Yeah.
the initial cost for infrastructure.
Yeah.
If you had to provide sewerage and stormwater, there'd be $200 million investment, you know, even if those people were living in town. You haven't had to have that cost of the initial infrastructure. That now is being charged out separately, but it wasn't previously. But we get less services, yeah.
That's interesting.
But we pay more now,
Okay.
and we'll pay a hell of a lot more with this proposal.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, Robert. And next I'd like to invite Peter Holly, please. Welcome.
No.
Good afternoon. As I understand it, this could be the last of the submission, is that correct?
We have two after you.
So this is truly the graveyard shift after lunch as well. So I trust you'll bear with me. Just by way of background, I hold an honours degree in business and a 4-year postgrad qualification, the Master of Business. And I do have a financial strategic background in planning and delivery, and I've worked in a number of multinational companies and more recently, as in 25 years, in the local neighbourhood. My interest here is probably broader than the individual submission, and you'll see that from my submission that I gather has been circulated and tabled. Is there anybody who has not had the opportunity to read that?
No.
So I take it if I ask some questions that are quite pointed and relevant, that everybody be able to answer them. I'm 86 Turinui Drive, to a lesser degree not really affected by the proposal. But one of the things that concerns me most of all is the state of our local government in New Zealand, and sadly Napier as a property developer is falling into that exact same position. So really having a look at this and saying what are the options available to us. So it may seem prescriptive, it's not. I'm not an expert in local government or in rates. Just really poking the bear here to see if we can get some better solutions to the problems that we're confronted with. There is simply no justification to openly discriminate against residents of Napier. 2,700 approximate households will be unjustly affected by this with no apparent gain, because by each and one of our own admission, we're not getting any more money. We've got the same amount of money in the same pool, but the needs are getting greater, not less. So are we going down the right track? And that's where this is taking us to. So not an expert, and don't wish to be critical, and also don't wish to tell you how to run your business, but as elected officials we do have to consider some of the consequences of this. And I no doubt on the previous submissions, I know many of you would have heard about valuations based on capital value or land value. There is an inherently fundamental problem in New Zealand at the moment, is we have a shortage of houses that's going to go probably for the next decade. Overlay on that, we've got a pandemic, an international pandemic, and if anybody thinks that it's behind us, think again. The WHO has said we've got 7.5 years to get the planet vaccinated. We are not going to see high growth in an international recession. So the premise of our planning for the LTP at 6% growth is fundamentally broken. And if that's what we're collecting money against, we need to go back and have a look at that. Compounded at a rate of 6% over the next 10 years, Napier will grow from 62,000 dwellings to 111,000. We haven't grown in the last 20 years from 55 to 62,000. So you need to look at those premises behind what we're planning against. And the previous submitter spoke very eloquently about the LTP preceding the budget. And I hear what we say about perception, but there has to be some forward planning on the part of the council in terms of how you achieve that. On the way in on the radio, breaking news, Wellington Council are advocating a 14% rate increase across the board. It's no different to where we are. We've got broken drainage, we're still pumping raw sewage into the sea, and we've been doing that for decades. And we're fixing pipes, we're not fixing the system. Just to name a few issues, if we believe that we're going to extract more money from 2,700 ratepayers that are going to address issues of that substantial nature, we're going to find ourselves in another problem where the good folk of Napier South, or some people who are on retirement money, are going to be staring at 30 or 40% increases in their land values. And how are we going to tax them to tackle these big problems? And that's the issue at hand. So for me, I've made a submission. I've criticised the methodology, and I think openly in the sense that if this were ever taken on a judicial review by an independent person, that you would look at it and go, there's some pretty serious deficiencies, both in the logic, the thought, the methodology, and how it's going to work. Just some interesting figures which came to me, and I haven't acknowledged Adele Henderson. Adele, thank you for your work at such short notice. I did appreciate that. There was some more material that came through afterwards, which was subject to a Local Government Act request, and that was planning at plus 6%. That needs to be considered very carefully. The Napier City headcount since 2012 has grown by 26%. The population growth does not match that. So really what we're saying is that the council is growing faster than the region and is requiring more money to feed itself. And that brings us into the question of what is the right size of an organisation. And I've worked very tirelessly in the last 8 years in a $2 billion enterprise where we've asked ourselves that exact question. The 80s, conglomerates, acquisitions, the 90s, grow, into the 20s where we are now. The question is, what is the right size of our business? How many people do we need to effectively deliver the services, and what is the cost of that, and how do we best achieve that? I know it's not relevant here, but the Hawke's Bay Regional Council picked up civil defence some time back. My rates for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council have gone from $265 a year to $570. If I have a look at my general rates, in 2018 they went up 137%, in 2019 they went up 247%, and then in 2020 they went up 34%. We are in a hyperinflationary environment around the council and the administration of the size of the council and what it's predicated to deliver on. And that brings us into the next interesting argument. 3 years ago, Bill Dalton and Wayne Jack featured in the Hawke's Bay Today, and they were celebrating a $3 million surplus. And I thought to myself, why as a public benefit entity would you celebrate a surplus? Because businesses who have shown a profit declare a dividend and their shareholders get their money back. In the case of a public benefit entity, it means one of two things. Either you've collected too much money and you haven't spent it, or you haven't delivered on the work program, one or the other. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in now in the broader context of knuckling down onto those ratepayers. There is not a lot of money in Napier, and there's a lot of good, hard-working people. We don't have big tertiary institutions. We're not the home of big conglomerates that pay big salaries. These are hard-working people, and they're production-based. And I think to take a swipe at a select group of people like this is manifestly unfair. It's unjust, and more to the point, it's not sustainable. We're going to be sitting around the same table in another 4 years arguing another case because why? We never reviewed the total rating system for 32 years. And that's my request to this committee is to please go back and consider the total rating regime for the city, what is required to deliver on pumps that work when it rains, not putting raw sewage into the sea, and ensuring that this city is a safe and comfortable place to live, but also affordable with a good quality and healthy lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And certainly you've commented on the challenges that are facing local government across the country at the moment, which is very much in the public eye. So I think there's some tough decision making for all councils in New Zealand coming up in the foreseeable future around these infrastructure issues.
Kirsten, I was going to draw some parallels just to see if I could get some context here. If we had put the price of our wine up admission at the same rate that the councils put their rates up, you'd be paying about $40 for a bottle of wine. That is, and the reality is you can't extract that out of the market. Our last price increase was 9 years ago. So the last time we put up our price of admission was 9 years ago. So the private sector works differently to the public sector. We acknowledge that. And I think it's just a question of how much money do we need to get the job done. And if it's more, then so be it. But let's share that burden and come out with a better city. But if we can't, then we live with a broken system.
And I guess just to add to the context conversation, Napier City Council has had the lowest average rate increases across the whole of the country over the last 20 years.
It's also one of the poorest regions.
We could sit down and have a good conversation over a wine or two.
I'd welcome the opportunity, thank you.
So I will open up to councillors for any questions they may have. No. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
And next we have Eddie Clark. On his way? Kerry. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to my submission. For those of you, and I'm sure as I've heard from you already, you will have already read these submissions. I have not gone into the detail that some of the others have with percentages and trying to work out who is paying more or why. Mine is fundamentally a simple question that I wanted to put to council is why does council think that taxing a select number of rural residents is beneficial for the overall population of the city. I've lived in Bayview, which is Hill Road, for the last 23 years, and I've already heard other submitters say there's no services in their areas. Exactly the same applies to Bayview. I chose to live out there, and I accept that I will pay for my own sewage disposal and I will pay for my own water, and I have no footpaths or street lighting. And to be honest, until very recently, I had no collection of recyclable materials either. That's been a new thing. But when I look at something like this, and it seems that a select area has been targeted to fund the expenditure of the council on it as a whole, I just struggle to understand how you people sitting around this table can think that that is fair and reasonable. And I appreciate you have a difficult job, but I think you need to rethink how you're going about trying to balance the books, so to speak. I've heard other submitters make the comment, if you look at the size of the rural properties, and for example, mine's a 1.5 hectare property. I'm not allowed to subdivide it, so I'm stuck with that property, and you seem to have come up with a position here that if the improvements are worth more than the land value, then somehow I should pay more rates. I fail to see what that has to do with anything when you cannot subdivide the land. It's all very well in some of the other areas where you can subdivide, but I've just heard that Jervois Town can't be subdivided, and I'm assuming it's the same sort of philosophy in other areas, or same practice in other areas. So I ask the council to seriously consider why you think increasing the tax on what I've now heard is some 2,000 odd residents is somehow going to benefit everyone and be fairer. When I look at the usage that I put my particular property to, it's planted in trees. No accounting is taken by the council for people like myself who have got, in my case, 1,000 eucalyptus trees and a huge garden essentially on that property. That has a benefit for the wider community. It provides a home for a lot of native bird life. But it also means I have to incur additional expense in keeping pests under control. And I pay a significant amount in rural fire insurance premiums every year too to ensure that I'm protected. And I don't think the council really takes consideration of those sorts of factors that people like myself who live on rural properties have. There's some mention in the documentation I've read that if you live within 100 metres of a particular service, then you will pay a percentage of it whether you are hooked up to that service or not. I don't know whether I live within 100 metres of water or sewage, I have no idea. But I don't think that should be a factor either. If I choose not to hook up to it, why should I have to pay for it? I just think that this proposal has been considered from the wrong perspective, and I rather think that there's a lot of people who somehow think that rural or semi-rural property owners can afford to pay the sorts of rate increases that are being proposed. And I just don't think that that's the case for most people, certainly the ones that I know that live out where I live. So I'm happy to take questions from any of the councillors.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Do we have any questions? No, I think being towards the end of the submissions, you're off the hook for questions. There have a lot been asked already, but thank you very much for taking the time to come in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Right, well, we'll just have a brief adjournment while we wait for our last submitter to arrive.